The Washington Republican, who so many people say did as much as anyone to amid all the scandals and the coup, continue to enable Trump. Kevin McCarthy now speaking out in ways that hold some peril for Republicans next year. Now, in a few moments, we're actually going to walk through some vintage early McCarthy video that's pretty revealing. But first, we're going to show you why he's in the news tonight. Obviously, it's been a bruising year. After everything he had to do just to get the gavel, he then was ousted in one of the shortest speakerships in American history. It was humiliating. He was defenestrated by his big public enemies, including people who are not very popular in Congress, like Matt Gaetz. And yet, after all that, the context for McCarthy here is we all know Trump had claimed publicly that he will be seeking retribution a second term. Donald Trump has said that. Donald Trump may sometimes lie, he may sometimes obfuscate, but he has actually been quite direct in promising to abuse power and potentially break the law to go after his enemies. And yet McCarthy, who was literally run out of Congress over all of his back and forth with Trump and tried to suck up enough to hold his job and couldn't, now McCarthy insists all of that will change.
What President Trump needs to do in this campaign, it needs to be about rebuilding, restoring, renewing America. It can't be about revenge.
He's talking about retribution day in, day out.
He needs to stop that. He needs to stop that.
You think he's going to listen to you saying, stop that, stop that? Well, he hasn't listened to anybody before.
That's not true. He will adapt when he gets all the facts.
He will adapt. Adapt being another word for change, and change not being something that Donald Trump has done on this issue. Donald Trump is, of course, holding fast and strong on the election lies that fed the insurrection, that led to the defamation that relates to both Giuliani in court today for that. As I mentioned, we have more on that later, and Fox settling for over $500 million. There's no sign of adapt. And McCarthy, of course, knows that. But McCarthy, now run out of Congress by MAGA hardliners, is trying to still somehow, in his new post-Congress iteration, sit around sucking up to MAGA hardliners, which he doesn't have to do. He could just be an independent citizen and kind of move past all of this. But he thinks this is what he has to do to help himself.
I believe Donald Trump will win. I believe the Republicans will gain more seats in the House and the Republicans will win the Senate.
Can he count on your support?
Yes.
That's an endorsement.
I will support the president. I will support President Trump.
Would you be willing to serve in a Trump cabinet?
In the right position. Look, if I'm the best person for the job, yes.
In the right position, you know, there's an almost silly, maybe practiced nonchalance that he's going for here, when we all know, if we pay any attention, that Kevin McCarthy was privately horrified by the coup and then publicly blasted it. How can you say that a coup was the wrong thing to do, was bad for America, must be stopped, that Trump's responsible for it, and then say, yeah, but if there's another term, I'll just join the post-coup term? That's what McCarthy says he's down for. Trump's allies are, of course, pushing this loyalty pledge in a planned power grab to push the limits of the federal government if they get power. And McCarthy's own political history is back in the news tonight because we want to look at the actual facts and context of this. As I mentioned, and again, we show the evidence, you make up your own mind, but we do know as a matter of public fact that right after January 6th, McCarthy was clear about Trump and only later, under political pressure, reversed himself.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding.
I don't see how he could be found criminally responsible. He did not charge it. Well, what criminal activity did he do? He told people to be peaceful.
Well, which is it? Was he responsible for what happened, or did he tell people to be peaceful? McCarthy, when he realized that Trump was not going to get in the trouble that he had thought, at least on the right, rushed down in this infamous visit to Mar-a-Lago, part of a long, humiliating year that still resulted in his MAGA defenestration. And he was asked about all this in the interview.
You went to visit Trump at Mar-a-Lago. You threw him a lifeline. He might have been finished if you didn't go. Would you do it again?
No, that's your opinion, Ed.
Okay, that's your opinion. We also spoke to someone who is not just well known for leading the Jan 6 committee and her recent book tour, which you've probably seen in the media, but let's remember, Liz Cheney was in the private meetings with McCarthy. She was part of leadership. She was on the private calls, some of which later leaked. She was part of this 3 or 4 people who actually run the Republican Party, except and unless they decide to let Donald Trump, the ex-president and triple indictee, run it. So listen to what she said about this man she served with.
Kevin McCarthy is, throughout this period, he had multiple opportunities to do the right thing, and each time he did the wrong thing. And it isn't just that it has now cost him his career, but it's that it cost the nation greatly that the leader of the Republicans in the House didn't lead. He needed Donald Trump's donors, and that meant he had to help Donald Trump wipe away the stain of what he's done to our country.
That is an insider. Whatever you think of her political history or the evolutions she's made, she is publicly taking an account here. She wrote it down. She served on the Jan 6 committee, and she's telling us, that was in a Beat interview, about the donors and the other dirty political process here. That if he was going to stay Speaker, he thought he really had to shore that up. But remember, he didn't stay Speaker. It didn't work. Kevin McCarthy is in the news tonight because he's speaking out, and we're getting a preview of what happens to some of the most powerful Republicans. He was in the line of succession. He was, at one point, the most senior Republican in office in Washington just a few months ago. What happens when you take it all away from them? Well, in McCarthy's case, and again, we're going to discuss this with experts, whether part of this is his personality, but the humiliations he endured did not make him say, the heck with y'all. It made him, if anything, more eager to try to win these people back over who hate him. Never forget what he went through.
Well, it's Groundhog Day. Again.
The root issue is this. They do not trust Kevin McCarthy.
The House is not in order.
Maybe the right person for the job of Speaker of the House isn't someone who has sold shares of themselves for more than a decade to get it.
I mean,
Wow.
this looks like a bit of a heated conversation. Yeah.
This is an incredible moment. McCarthy is now directly engaging Matt Gaetz.
The only time that we lost the conservative agenda was when Kevin McCarthy went behind the Republican conference.
The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
Vacant. If past is prologue, then Kevin McCarthy's very recent past shows you both where the Republican Party is headed and, many people think, potentially into a wall if it has no adjustment process for what remains a very unpopular and indicted former president. Now, how did we get here? Well, McCarthy used to sound much more like a standard issue Republican. At the 2000 Republican National Convention, Bush versus Gore, he was actually chair of the Young Republicans National Federation.
Welcome, Kevin McCarthy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have an important announcement. Al Gore did not invent the internet. But the Young Republicans and YRock.com will revolutionize it. We believe in freedom. We believe in opportunity. We believe in the free market. We believe in taking responsibility for our own future. We believe individuals can soar higher when they are unbound by the shackles of oppressive big government. Abraham Lincoln taught us the value of unity. Theodore Roosevelt taught us to dare greatly. We take the great lessons of the past and apply them to a changing future.
That was a quarter century ago, give or take, 23 years. I just want to sit with you for a minute as we look at the evidence of how we got here and where we're going, because that Kevin McCarthy at that point in time did not have publicly the hallmarks of someone who would give in to authoritarian dictators. And if you could do a time travel and put him on truth serum, I'm not sure that young person would admit that he would be joining coups, particularly coups that he condemned, and then a month later eating his words. And if you looked at what he said there, I just jotted it down: freedom, opposing oppressive government. And notice the Republican presidents he shouted out: Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt. At that time, in that Republican Party, that was a nod to a more moderate wing and the traditions of some of the, to this day, more historically celebrated Republicans. Wasn't Nixon, wasn't even Reagan, who's so often quoted. And so what we see in the long, slow, humiliating, patchwork rise and very quick fall, and as I deliberately said, defenestration of this sordid political tale is both a lesson for the perils of authoritarian and right-wing threats in any country, America not immune, but also at the political level, because we are dealing with politics and elections, how even doing that doesn't save your seat, didn't save his speakership. And does that mean that other Republicans can either learn this lesson as they watch this or learn the wrong lessons and go into an election next year where they are so far right and so authoritarian and so alienating that, as with the red fizzle in the last midterms, which McCarthy oversaw, and some other recent setbacks, they are on a collision course with an electorate that, best we can tell, does not welcome the open, blatant, and sordid confession of more coups to come.